So every year during the month of October, I try to mainly watch horror or otherwise spooky season movies. I also try not to just pick a random assortment of scary stuff to watch. So this year I decided I was going to watch a bunch of the really old Universal horror movies. There's actually quite a few, but I went by the Wikipedia page for the Universal Classic Monsters and decided on the 7 that were deemed iconic enough to be featured in every home video release collection. So those 7 are Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Wolfman, the Invisible Man, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and the Bride of Frankenstein. Those 7 are a pretty neat group of iconic horror characters. You could definitely think of more Halloween figures like witches, ghosts, or my personal favorite monster figure, the Headless Horseman. I'm not kidding, I genuinely find Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow story and its many adaptations all to be really interesting pieces of media. But anyway, these 7 actually got the really old movies to star in. And most of those movies are the first cinematic appearance of a particular monster, and I think that's cool. So I thought I'd make this video real quick and give my rough thoughts on each movie. Before I get started though, I'm just going to say up front, I don't think any of them are amazing, but I think that's because I have pretty modern tastes when it comes to movies. I definitely get that for the audience at the time, the movies were pretty impressive though. So first up is Dracula. I found this one fairly boring. I really don't remember that much of the plot. And I think vampires are pretty cool. I'm a fan of the What We Do in the Shadows movie, and I guess also the TV show. I've seen some of that. But the rules for this particular vampire in this movie, they're kind of vague and not well defined, I would say. But Bela Lugosi, who's the guy who plays Dracula, he's really good. I definitely understand why he's a horror icon. And then last about this movie, I didn't go into it watching with this lens, but you could definitely make this argument. It's kind of maybe xenophobic, because the whole point of the movie is here's this foreigner named Dracula from a different country, and he sucks blood, and that's not good. So you could definitely see this movie as xenophobic if you wanted to make that argument. So yeah. Next up is Frankenstein. I actually like this one a lot more. It's got a pretty compelling story about the whole mad scientist creates a monster and stuff. Boris Karloff plays the monster. He's really good at that character. And there's a lot of memorable set pieces in this movie, like when the monster comes to life, and once the monster is alive, it starts doing fun stuff. I don't know fun stuff, but you see it do a lot of stuff when it gets loose. It's interesting. This one is a nice complete story. The pacing wasn't that weird because we get introduced to the scientist, and then we see him make the monster, and then we see the monster do its thing for about half the movie, and then eventually all the townspeople decide they have to defeat the monster with the torches and stuff. It's very iconic, but you get the whole picture in this one movie. There's no loose threads, or it doesn't pick up too early or anything. So this one I think is the best out of all of them, I'd probably say. But yeah. Next is The Mummy, and this one is not very good. Let me tell you about the plot to The Mummy, the original version at least. So the plot is that you meet these archaeologists. They found a mummy, and they just have it displayed. You see it like start to move and come alive, and this one guy just absolutely freaks the heck out. Like, he goes crazy. That's like the first 10 minutes, and the rest, the mummy has a more human appearance. I guess some time has passed, he's fully come back to life, and it's literally just romantic melodrama because the mummy thinks that this one girl looks like this girl that he knew back in like ancient times. It's really weird. It's definitely not what I expected, but Boris Karloff plays the mummy here as well, and he's still a pretty good actor, so that's nice. But yeah, this movie is weird. Next up is The Wolfman. So I don't know if I like a wolf man better than a werewolf, and I think the difference would be a wolf man looks more like a man with some fur on his face, and then a werewolf would have more like canine features. I don't really know if I like one better than the other. This one is definitely the wolf man though, and I don't really like the look of this one. It looks kind of goofy. Just a guy with a bunch of hair on his face and he kind of looks like me, honestly. I don't know. But the guy who becomes the Wolfman, his name's Larry, and he's kind of a ladies' man. I guess the 40s equivalent of a ladies' man. Some of his flirting behavior, I guess, probably hasn't aged that well, so that's kind of interesting, I guess. But yeah, the whole werewolf mythology is also kind of different than what I know, what modern versions have kind of established, and that's fair because it is an old movie. But I just thought that was interesting. It sounds like I'm hating on the movie. It's not even that bad. It's just, I don't know. But I guess I'll mention it here. I watched the Marvel Werewolf by Night special, which was definitely inspired by some of these old horror movies, and that's actually really good. I really enjoyed that a lot more than some of these movies. Like I said, modern taste in film. But yeah, that's this one. Next up is The Invisible Man. This one's actually really good, like surprisingly good, because it's not as well known as some of the others. But the effects to make the guy invisible, they still hold up like really, really well. It's kind of crazy. And also the fact that the guy is invisible, the performance of the character, it's really mostly voice acting. And I think voice acting is a little more interesting to me, at least, as a type of acting than like on-screen acting. Because you got to sell the entire character with just one aspect of your performance. So I just really like voice acting. I think it's really interesting to judge a voice actor's performance, and the guy who plays the Invisible Man, Claude Rains, he's doing a really good job. So yeah, that and the effects. Like, this is actually a really interesting movie, at least from some aspects. The pacing though is a little weird, because when we meet him, he's already invisible. We don't see how he becomes like that. And also they do this thing where like they say that he's insane because he became invisible. I don't really know. I don't know. But they had to make him somewhat evil because he is a monster, I guess. But yeah, this one was actually had a lot more stuff to enjoy than I expected, so that was pretty cool. Next up is The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And with this one, it was made a little later, like the 50s instead of the 30s or 40s. So there's a shift from like supernatural to like science. They're on like a science expedition in the Amazon, and they find this gill man. And I gotta say, the gill man suit looks pretty fake, and I think it doesn't look that bad, but I noticed that it really doesn't have a lot of mobility out of it. It's because it's a rubber suit. And I think that makes it look kind of obviously fake. Because the creature really can't move that much. I mean, it can move, but it's a rubber suit. I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but that's what I thought of that. And also, whenever you see the creature, like in the movie, it's accompanied by this really loud noise for a score, and that's pretty annoying. But the visuals for like the underwater scenes, those were good though. So this one's all right, I think. And then the last one I watched was The Bride of Frankenstein. This one's really more of a part 2 than a sequel, because it picks up right where the original left off. We get reintroduced to the mad scientist and the monster. And because it's a part 2 and it continues right from the original, it's got some great moments. Like, the monster gets a lot of interesting development. Like, he meets this blind man and he kind of teaches him words and stuff. And in the original, the monster really couldn't talk, just kind of walk around and be grumpy. But in this one, he like learns words and like fire bad, friend good, you know. I mean, these movies are iconic, so you probably can get a sense of what I'm talking about, even if you haven't seen the movies. I don't know. But there's some weird moments in this, so I don't think it's better than the original because it's kind of weird sometimes. Like they introduce this other character, this other mad scientist, and he's like, I've also done your Frankenstein experiment and I've created life. And then like, what's this guy talking about? And he whips out these like miniature people. And that part of the movie is not iconic at all. I did not expect that or know about it going in. Like, what is this scene? I don't understand. Why is this in the movie? It's so weird. I guess I should probably also mention, it's called Bride of Frankenstein. the title character, she appears at the very end. She gets like a minute of screen time. She doesn't really do anything, and yet she's still really iconic. That's so weird. But yeah, so I like this one as well, I guess, but I don't actually think it's as good as the original Frankenstein, which I think is the best one out of all of these. So those are my rough thoughts on these old movies. The monster characters are iconic, so I found it really interesting to see their original depictions in film. And obviously, their first ever movies, that's pretty much why they're so iconic, because they had these movies back in the day that lived on into pop culture. So Halloween, and really all of October, in my opinion, I think is about spooky figures like these ones. So I'm really glad that I got to dive into these old movies this month.